All right, let's uncork this bottle of knowledge, shall we? We've gotten some fantastic listener mail about Cabernet Franc.
Really diving deep into Cabernet Franc. This should be fun.
I am so ready. I feel like I know the name, but to be honest, I don't know much else, so let's get schooled.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Cabernet Franc, it's interesting because it often kind of gets uh, overshadowed by Cabernet Sauvignon,
Ah, yeah.
the more famous offspring, you could say.
Offspring. Wait, family drama already.
A little bit. So Cabernet Franc is actually one of the parent grapes of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's their connection. But what's fascinating is Cabernet Sauvignon, can be a bit bold sometimes. Cabernet Franc, though, has this elegance, this finesse that really comes through, especially when it's a single varietal wine.
Okay. So it's like the classier, less showy sibling, maybe? I can get down with that.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You said single varietal. Does that mean it's used in blends too?
Absolutely. It's a key player in those legendary Bordeaux blends that everybody knows and loves.
Oh, okay. But to really understand Cabernet Franc,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to take a little mental trip over to the Loire Valley in France.
Ooh, Packport, please.
Right, because that's Cabernet Franc's home turf.
Yeah.
That's where it really shines, especially on its own.
Okay. So what makes the Loire Valley so special for this grape? What is it about that region?
Well, it all boils down to, the magic word, terroir,
Ah, yes.
which is, that fascinating interplay of climate, soil, grape variety, all these things coming together.
Okay.
Now, the Loire Valley, it's got a cooler climate than, say, like a California, right?
Okay.
And this cooler climate leads to Cabernet Francs that are a little bit lighter in body. They have a brighter acidity.
Okay, hold on. Acidity in wine. Where, for those of us who didn't go to sommelier school, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
Sure. Think of acidity like the backbone of the wine.
Okay.
It's that mouth-watering quality that makes you want to take another sip, right?
Yes.
And so in Cabernet Franc from the Loire, you often find this beautiful, tangy acidity, almost like, like a squeeze of cranberry or red currant. It's that kind of a vibe.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So cooler climate, we have the bright acidity. What about those flavors?
Oh, get ready for a sensory adventure.
Sure.
Because Loire Valley Cabernet Francs, they're known for these gorgeous aromas of red berries,
Okay.
think raspberry, cranberry, think often with these herbal notes, like bell pepper,
Okay.
almost like fresh picked from the garden kind of thing. And then maybe even a hint of violets too. It's like walking through a springtime meadow after a rain shower.
Ooh, I'm already there.
Right.
But I know it's not all Loire Valley, right? So what about when Cabernet Franc is grown in other areas, maybe warmer climates? What happens?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting because in warmer regions, like a California Cabernet Franc, it kind of takes on a whole different personality.
Mm.
Yeah. The warmer climate means that those grapes, they ripen a little bit more fully.
Mm.
And that leads to bolder flavors, fuller bodies. So think riper, jammier fruit flavors like black cherry, plum, still with those signature herbal notes, but now maybe with a touch more spice.
Mm.
You might get a hint of black pepper or clove.
Wow. Okay, so the same grape can be light and elegant or bold and spicy just depending on where it's grown. That's incredible.
That's the beauty of terroir.
Yeah.
Isn't it fascinating? And this is also where those tannins come into play.
Ah, yes, tannins. I feel like that word always pops up when we're talking about wine, but break that down for me one more time. What's the deal with tannins, and what's their role specifically in Cabernet Franc?
Okay, tannins are they're like the guardians of a wine's aging potential.
Okay.
They would give you that mouth-drying sensation, almost like a puckering feeling.
Right. Like when you take a sip and it's almost like, yeah, drawing.
Exactly. And high tannins, they can make a young wine taste a little bit harsh, but as the wine ages those tannins, they soften, they integrate. They give the wine more complexity, smoother texture over time.
So it's like a fine wine that needs a little time to open up to really hit its stride.
Exactly. It's like that friend who needs a little time to warm up at a party, but once they do,
Life of the party.
life of the party. There you
Yeah.
go. And climate plays a role here too. Remember how we were talking about those bolder Cabernet Francs from warmer climates?
Yeah.
They tend to have firmer, more robust tannins, which means those wines, they can age beautifully for years, sometimes even decades.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you're opening a bottle of Cabernet Francs from Napa Valley, definitely maybe check that vintage, right?
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, those elegant Cabernet Francs from the cooler Loire, they usually have softer tannins. So they're often a little bit more approachable, even in their youth.
Oh. So I could pop open a bottle of Chinon tonight and not feel like I'm committing some kind of wine faux pas.
Not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, many Loire Cabernet Francs, they're meant to be enjoyed young, fresh.
Music to my ears. Speaking of Chinon, that was another region, along with Bourgogne, that was mentioned in the materials. It said those places are like where Cabernet Franc is really the star of the show.
Absolutely. Those are appellations, like officially designated wine regions where Cabernet Franc reigns supreme. In Chinon, you'll often find these wines that have this wonderful earthy minerality along with those red fruit and herbal notes. It's like tasting the limestone soil the vines are grown in.
It's like you can really taste the place, huh?
You can.
That's so cool.
Now, Bourgogne, on the other hand, tends to produce Cabernet Francs that have a bit more structure, a little bit more intensity. They're often described as having like a more rustic character with those darker fruit flavors and sometimes even hints of, this is going to sound strange, but like pencil lead or graphite.
Okay, now that's an aroma I haven't encountered in a wine before.
It's definitely unique, but it just goes to show Cabernet Franc, it's incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
Right? You can find everything from those light and fruity styles to these rich, earthy expressions, all within this one grape variety.
That is wild. But it's not just France, right? There are other people, other countries making Cabernet Franc. I feel like I was reading about vineyards popping up in some surprising places.
Yeah, Cabernet Franc is having a real moment right now. It's
Very
like
good.
this global renaissance is happening. Winemakers around the world are embracing this grape. One region that's been generating a lot of buzz is Canada,
Oh.
particularly the Niagara Peninsula.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, think about Canada, cool climate, right?
Fair.
They're producing these Cabernet Francs with incredible vibrancy, acidity,
Yeah.
often bursting with those bright red fruit flavors, cranberry, red currant, and sometimes with this really distinct herbal note that's been described as like rhubarb.
Rhubarb.
Yeah, like a little bit of that tartness.
I'm here for it.
And then you have South Africa, Stellenbosch. They're producing some really interesting Cabernet Francs as well, often with a little bit of a wilder character,
Okay.
maybe a little savory note, along with those classic fruit and herb flavors.
Oh, I'm adding this to my list right now. I need to try these.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. And we can't forget about the Southern Hemisphere, right? You have Chile, Argentina. They're even experimenting with Cabernet Franc now, producing some really, really interesting wines.
That's incredible. I mean, it just goes to show this grape can thrive in all these different climates, all these different places, and then it produces all these completely different flavor profiles. That's wild.
It is. And each region is putting its own unique stamp on the grape. It's really cool to see.
Speaking of unique stamps, I gotta be honest, this is making me hungry. I want to talk about food. Like, what are we pairing with these Cabernet Francs? Speaking of unique stamps, I gotta be honest, this is making me hungry. I want to talk about food. Like, what are we pairing with these Cabernet Francs?
Now you're talking. It's a food-friendly wine, that's for sure.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you got those herbal notes, often that peppery finish makes it a natural pairing for all kinds of dishes.
Okay, so give me the rundown. Loire Valley first. What are we having?
Okay, so those lighter-bodied Cabernet Francs with that bright acidity, the earthiness, they're fantastic with the roasted chicken, roasted duck.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, that herbaceousness in the wine,
Mm-hmm.
it'll complement the poultry beautifully. And the acidity can cut through that richness of the bird. It's really, really lovely.
That sounds so good. All right, so what about when we get into those bigger Cabernet Francs, the warmer climates, those jammier fruits, maybe a little spice? What are we pairing those with?
Those are your go-tos for the heartier fare.
Okay.
Think like grilled steak, lamb chops, even a juicy burger.
Ooh, yes.
Right, because the tannins, that structure, can really stand up to the richness of the meat. And then those ripe fruit flavors, they add this beautiful counterpoint.
It's making me realize Cabernet Franc, way more versatile than I initially thought going into this. I didn't even add, there were some vegetarian pairings too, right? Like, what about those?
Absolutely. Cabernet Franc really shines here too. That herbal character makes it surprisingly delicious with dishes that have mushrooms, lentils, eggplants,
Okay.
all that kind of stuff. Think like roasted portobello mushrooms with herbs, little sprinkle of Parmesan, or a hearty lentil stew with those root vegetables.
That sounds incredible. See, this is why I love these deep dives. Okay, so now I have to ask, right? We've talked about where it's from, what it tastes like, but what about the future of Cabernet Franc? Are there trends? Are there things we should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, definitely. One of the most exciting trends right now is this focus on sustainable, organic viticulture. More and more winemakers are embracing organic and biodynamic farming.
And why is that particularly good for Cabernet Franc?
Well, remember we were talking about terroir earlier
Yeah.
and how Cabernet Franc really expresses those nuances of where it's grown. Organic and biodynamic farming, it really prioritizes that soil health, that biodiversity,
Wow.
which allows the grape to really, really reflect its sense of place.
Oh, okay, okay. So it's like by really taking care of the land, we're going to get even more interesting, more expressive Cabernet Francs down the line.
Exactly, exactly.
Mm.
And then another trend is this exploration of new terroirs. So as winemakers are becoming more familiar with Cabernet Franc, they're like, well, why don't we try it here? Let's see what happens. So they're experimenting, planting it in regions that, maybe wouldn't have been considered traditional for this grape.
Wow. So new regions, new flavors, new discoveries. Sounds like Cabernet Franc is just getting started.
It's an exciting time for Cabernet Franc.
It really is. This has been such a fantastic deep dive. I feel like I knew so little going into this, and I feel like now I could talk about this all day.
It's a hidden gem, and it's getting its moment.
And it deserves it. It really, really does. So to everyone listening, if you're feeling inspired by this, if you're intrigued, go out there, grab yourself a bottle, try it, maybe start with a classic region, a Loire Valley, or venture out, see what Canada's doing, see what South Africa is doing.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yes. Experiment with the food, experiment with the different regions. Who knows? You might just find your new favorite wine in the process. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.